I never thought the woman I welcomed into my family with open arms would be the one to break my heart into 1,000 pieces. My name is Gloria. I'm 68 years old. And for the past 4 years, I believed I was building something beautiful with my son Marcus and his wife Shanice. I thought we were family. I thought love meant sacrifice. I thought being needed was the same as being valued. I was wrong about everything. The evening it all fell apart started like any other Tuesday. I was standing in my kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd taught Marcus to scramble eggs when he was 7, stirring a pot of my famous beef stew. The aroma filled the house, that rich, hearty smell that had always meant home to our family. I had been cooking for 3 hours, carefully browning the meat, chopping vegetables with the precision my grandmother had taught me, adding just the right amount of seasoning to make it perfect. This wasn't just dinner. This was love in a pot. Marcus was in the living room, watching television, his feet propped up on the coffee table I'd bought him when he first moved in with Shanice. She was sitting beside him, scrolling through her phone with that bored expression she'd perfected over the years. They had been living in my house for 4 years now, ever since Marcus lost his job at the warehouse and couldn't make rent on their apartment. What was supposed to be a temporary arrangement had become permanent, but I didn't mind. At least, I thought I didn't mind. I called out to them that dinner was almost ready, my voice carrying the warmth of a mother who still found joy in feeding her family. Shanice looked up from her phone with an expression I'd never seen before, something cold and sharp that made my stomach clench. She stood up slowly, deliberately, and walked into the kitchen where I was still stirring the stew. The words she spoke next are burned into my memory forever. She looked me dead in the eye and said, "Gloria, I need to be real with you about something. You're becoming a burden in this house." The wooden spoon in my hand stopped moving. The world seemed to pause, as if even time itself was shocked by the cruelty of those words. I stared at her, waiting for her to laugh, to say she was joking, to take it back somehow. But her face remained stone cold, unmoved by the devastation spreading across mine. She continued, her voice steady and matter-of-fact, as if she were discussing the weather. "Marcus and I have been talking, and we think it's time for you to consider moving to one of those senior living places. You know, where you can be around people your own age. We need our space to build our life together. And honestly, having you here all the time is just too much." I felt something die inside my chest. This woman, who I had welcomed into my home when she had nowhere else to go, who I had cooked for every single day, who I had treated like the daughter I never had, was calling me a burden in my own house while I was cooking dinner for her ungrateful mouth. My hands began to shake, not from age or weakness, but from the pure shock of betrayal. I had given them everything. I had opened my doors, shared my space, my food, my life. I had watched Shanice eat at my table for 4 years, never once asking her to contribute to groceries, never once complaining when she left her dishes in the sink for me to clean. The spoon fell from my trembling fingers and clattered against the side of the pot. The sound seemed to echo through the kitchen, breaking the terrible silence that had fallen between us. I looked at this woman who had just shattered my heart and realized I was seeing her clearly for the very first time. I turned off the stove without saying a word. The beef stew that I had been preparing with such love would go unfinished. I walked past Shanice, past Marcus, who was still glued to his television, completely unaware that his wife had just destroyed his mother. I went to my bedroom, picked up my purse and my car keys, and walked back through the living room. Marcus finally looked up as I headed toward the front door. "Ma, where you going?" "Dinner smells good." I paused at the door and looked back at my son, my only child, the boy I had raised by myself after his father walked out on us when he was just 3 years old. I had worked double shifts at the hospital for 20 years to make sure he had everything he needed. I had sacrificed dates, relationships, my own happiness to focus on raising him right. And this was what I got in return. "Ask your wife," I said quietly, and walked out of my own house. I drove around the neighborhood for hours that night, my mind racing with 25 years of memories. I remembered the day Marcus was born, how tiny and perfect he was in my arms. I remembered teaching him to ride a bike, helping him with homework at this very kitchen table, celebrating when he graduated high school. I remembered how proud I was when he told me he was getting married, how excited I was to finally have a daughter-in-law. I had been so naive. When I finally came home around midnight, the house was dark. The pot of stew sat cold on the stove, abandoned, just like I had been. I could hear Marcus and Shanice talking in low voices behind their bedroom door, but I couldn't make out the words. I didn't want to. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I made my coffee in silence and sat at my kitchen table, really looking at my life for the first time in a long time. I started thinking about all the things I had been doing for Marcus and Shanice that they had simply accepted as their due. I paid the mortgage on this house every month, $1,500 that came directly from my retirement check. I bought all the groceries, cooked all the meals, did most of the cleaning. I paid the electric bill, the water bill, the cable bill. When Marcus's car broke down 6 months ago, I had paid for the repairs without him even asking. When Shanice wanted new clothes for a job interview, I had given her $300 from my savings. They had never offered to contribute to anything. They had never even said thank you. I realized that in my eagerness to feel needed, to feel useful, I had allowed myself to become their personal bank and housekeeper. They didn't see me as family. They saw me as a resource to be used until it was no longer convenient. That afternoon, Shanice knocked on my bedroom door. I could hear the false sweetness in her voice as she called my name. "Gloria, can we talk?" I opened the door to find her standing there with what she probably thought was an apologetic expression. But I could see right through it now. This wasn't genuine remorse. This was damage control. "I want to apologize for what I said yesterday," she began, her voice dripping with fake sincerity. "I was having a bad day, and I took it out on you. That wasn't right." I studied her face, looking for any sign of real regret, any indication that she understood the depth of pain she had caused. I found nothing but calculation behind her eyes. "Thank you for the apology," I said simply, and started to close the door. "Wait," she said quickly, putting her hand against the door. "Marcus and I were thinking maybe we could all go out to dinner tonight. You know, start fresh." Start fresh. As if 4 years of being taken advantage of could be erased with a meal I would undoubtedly be expected to pay for. "I have other plans," I lied. And this time, I did close the door. Over the next few weeks, I began to pay attention to things I had previously ignored. I noticed how Marcus and Shanice would disappear whenever there was work to be done around the house. I noticed how they would order expensive takeout while I was at the grocery store buying ingredients to cook for them. I noticed how they would make plans for expensive outings without ever considering whether I might like to be included. But they never hesitated to ask me for money to fund their adventures. I started keeping a mental tally of everything I was providing for them. The mortgage, utilities, food, household supplies, emergency car repairs, Shanice's shopping trips, Marcus's beer money. I was essentially funding the lifestyle of two able-bodied adults who contributed nothing to the household except their presence, which I was now being told was a gift I should be grateful for. The breaking point came exactly 3 weeks after Shanice called me a burden. Me, a burden. I was in my bedroom folding laundry when I heard Shanice on the phone with someone. Her voice carrying through the thin walls. She was laughing, that high-pitched giggle she reserved for when she thought she was being clever. "Girl, you should see how we got it set up here," she was saying. "Marcus's mama pays for everything, and I mean everything. The mortgage, groceries, bills, all of it. She even gave me money for that purse I showed you last week. It's like having a live-in ATM, except this one cooks and cleans too." My hands stopped moving. The towel I was holding fell back into the basket. "The best part is she thinks we actually need her," Shanice continued, her voice dripping with amusement. "Like she gets all excited when we let her cook for us or when Marcus asks her advice about something. It's actually kind of sad how desperate she is to feel useful. But hey, free rent is free rent, you know what I'm saying?" I felt something cold settle in my stomach. This wasn't just taking advantage of my generosity. This was calculated manipulation. They had been playing me for 4 years, and I had been too blinded by my love for my son and my desire to have a complete family to see it. "How long you think you can keep this up?" the voice on the other end asked, though I could barely make out the words. "As long as we want," Shanice replied confidently. "Where's she gonna go? She's 68 years old, with no husband, no other kids. We're all she's got, and she knows it. Besides, Marcus would never choose me over his precious mama, so she's stuck with us whether she likes it or not." The cruelty in her words took my breath away. She wasn't just using me for money. She was using my love for my son as a weapon against me, knowing I would endure anything to maintain my relationship with Marcus. That night at dinner, I watched them differently. I saw how Marcus would grunt his thanks when I placed his plate in front of him, barely looking up from his phone. I saw how Shanice would critique the meal, suggesting I add more salt or cook the vegetables less next time, as if I were her personal chef whose job performance needed constant evaluation. I saw how they would discuss their plans for the weekend right in front of me without ever asking if I wanted to join them. I was invisible unless they needed something from me. I was furniture that happened to pay bills and cook food. After they went to bed, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea and really thought about my situation. I had worked my entire life to build something for myself and my son. I had saved money, bought this house, planned for my retirement. I had imagined my golden years would be peaceful, maybe filled with travel or hobbies I never had time for when I was raising Marcus alone. Instead, I was trapped in my own home, funding the lifestyle of two people who saw me as nothing more than a convenient resource. They had stolen my peace, my dignity, and my dreams of a comfortable retirement. The next morning, I made a decision that would change everything. I called my bank and made an appointment with my financial advisor, a kind woman named Patricia, who had been helping me manage my retirement funds for the past 5 years. I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with, exactly how much of my life I had been giving away. Patricia spread my financial statements across her desk and began adding up numbers. Her expression grew more concerned with each calculation. "Gloria," she said finally, "in the past 4 years, You've spent almost $60,000 supporting Marcus and Shanice. That's money that came directly from your retirement savings and your monthly pension. $60,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. That was more than I had made in an entire year when Marcus was young and I was working as a nurse's aide. At this rate, Patricia continued gently, you'll be in serious financial trouble within the next few years. Your savings are being depleted much faster than they should be. I stared at the numbers on the page. Black ink that represented the sacrifice of my future for people who called me a burden behind my back. What would you recommend? I asked quietly. Patricia leaned forward, her expression compassionate but firm. You need to stop this immediately. Set boundaries. These are grown adults, and they need to take responsibility for their own lives. That afternoon, I drove to the library and spent 3 hours researching tenant rights and eviction procedures. If Marcus and Shanice wanted to treat me like a landlord instead of family, then I would start acting like one. I discovered that even though they were family members living in my house, they had established residency over the 4 years they had been there. I couldn't just throw their belongings on the lawn and change the locks. I would have to follow proper legal procedures. But I could do something else immediately. I could stop paying for everything. That evening, as they sat in my living room, watching my cable television, eating snacks I had bought with my money, I made my announcement. I have something to tell you both, I said, standing in the doorway between the kitchen and living room. Marcus muted the television and looked at me with mild irritation. What's up, Ma? Starting next month, I'm going to need you to contribute to the household expenses. The silence that followed was deafening. Shanice's mouth actually fell open, as if I had just announced I was joining the circus. What kind of expenses? Marcus asked slowly. Half the mortgage payment. That would be $750, plus half of all utilities, groceries, and household supplies. I estimate your share will be about $1,200 per month. Shanice found her voice first. $1,200? Gloria, that's crazy. We're family. Family doesn't charge each other rent. The irony of her words was not lost on me. Family doesn't call each other burdens either. But here we were. You're absolutely right, I said calmly. Family doesn't charge each other rent, but they also contribute to the household they live in. They show appreciation for the sacrifices others make for them. They don't take advantage of generosity and then complain about the person providing it. Marcus shifted uncomfortably on the couch. Ma, where is this coming from? We've never had problems before. We've never had problems because I've been paying for everything while you two have been living here for free, I replied. But I can't afford to do that anymore. My financial advisor made it very clear that I'm spending my retirement savings at an unsustainable rate. Shanice stood up, her face flushing with anger. So now you're trying to put us out on the street? Your own son? I'm asking you to be adults and contribute to your living expenses like every other adult in America has to do. We don't have that kind of money, Marcus said quietly. Then I suggest you figure out how to get it, I replied. You have 30 days. The next month was the most uncomfortable period of my adult life. Marcus and Shanice barely spoke to me, except to complain about my new requirements. They would whisper together in their room, their voices carrying through the walls in angry, urgent tones. Shanice tried various tactics to change my mind. She attempted guilt, reminding me of all the times she had kept me company or helped with small tasks around the house. She tried emotional manipulation, suggesting that I was punishing them for some imagined slight. She even attempted to turn Marcus against me. telling him that his mother was becoming cruel and unreasonable in her old age. But I had heard her true feelings about me during that phone conversation. I knew exactly what she thought of me, and I was no longer willing to pay for the privilege of being disrespected in my own home. 28 days into their 30-day notice, Marcus came to my bedroom door. "Ma, we need to talk." I looked up from the book I was reading. "What about?" "The money situation. We've been trying, but we can't come up with $1,200 every month. My job at the grocery store doesn't pay enough, and Shanice is still looking for work." "What are you asking me, Marcus?" He looked down at his feet, and for a moment, I saw the little boy who used to come to me when he was in trouble. "We're asking for more time. Maybe we could pay you $600 this month and make up the difference later." I closed my book and looked at my son, really looked at him. At 32 years old, he was still asking his mother to solve his problems, still expecting me to sacrifice my financial security for his comfort. "No," I said simply. "No." He looked genuinely shocked, as if the possibility of me refusing had never occurred to him. "No, you've had 4 years to get your lives together. 4 years of free housing, free food, free utilities. I gave you 30 days notice, and that time is almost up. But we're family, Ma. You can't just put your own son out on the street." Those words again. Family. The same word Shanice had used to justify taking advantage of me, now being used to pressure me into continuing to enable them. "Marcus," I said quietly, "family works both ways. Family means caring about each other's well-being. It means showing gratitude and respect. It means contributing to the household you live in. You and your wife have done none of those things." He stared at me as if I had grown a second head. In his mind, I was supposed to be the giving tree, endlessly providing while asking for nothing in return. The idea that I had needs and limitations was foreign to him. 2 days later, on the morning of day 30, I found an envelope slipped under my bedroom door. Inside, the envelope was a crumpled $20 bill and a note written in Shanice's handwriting. "This is all we have right now. Please give us another month. We promise we'll figure something out." Oh, $20? After 4 years of paying their way through life, after $60,000 of my retirement money, after being called a burden in my own home, they offered me $20 and asked for more time. I folded the note carefully and put it in my jewelry box next to my grandmother's ring. I knew this moment would be important to remember later. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in 4 years. I went to visit my friend Dorothy, who lived across town in a beautiful senior community called Sunset Gardens. Dorothy had been trying to get me to come see her new place for months, but I always had excuses. Marcus needed this. Shanice needed that. I had to cook dinner. I had to wait for a repairman. I had to be available. Dorothy gave me a tour of her 2-bedroom apartment with its modern kitchen and spacious living room. We sat on her balcony overlooking a garden where other residents were playing cards and laughing together. "Girl, you look tired," Dorothy said, studying my face with the keen eyes of a 60-year friendship. "What's going on with you?" I told her everything. The 4 years of financial support, the cooking and cleaning, the lack of appreciation, Shanice calling me a burden, the phone conversation I had overheard. Dorothy listened without interrupting, her expression growing darker with each detail. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she shook her head slowly. "Gloria, baby, they've been playing you like a fiddle, and the worst part is, you let them." Her words stung because they were true. I had been so desperate to feel needed, so afraid of being alone, that I had allowed myself to become a doormat. What should I do? I asked. Stop paying for everything. Today. Right now. Don't give them another dime. Don't cook another meal. Don't clean another dish. Let them figure out what it really costs to live. But Marcus is my son, and he's 32 years old. When you were 32, you were raising him by yourself and working 2 jobs. You didn't have anybody paying your bills. She was right. When Marcus was growing up, I had struggled every month to keep the lights on and food on the table. I had never expected anyone else to take care of my responsibilities. That evening, I came home to find Marcus and Shanice in the kitchen. They had actually cooked something for themselves, a box of macaroni and cheese that left orange powder scattered across my clean counters. Ma, where were you? Marcus asked. We were wondering when you were going to start dinner. I looked at the dirty pot in the sink, the empty cheese packet on the counter, the crumbs scattered across the floor. I ate dinner with Dorothy. You'll need to handle your own meals from now on. Shanice laughed. That same dismissive sound I had heard her make on the phone. Come on, Gloria. You know Marcus can't cook. Then he better learn, I replied, walking past them toward my bedroom. The next morning, I woke up to silence. Usually, I could hear Marcus getting ready for work, Shanice moving around in their room. Today, nothing. I made my coffee and sat at my kitchen table, enjoying the peace. At 8:30, Marcus appeared in the doorway in his work uniform, looking frantic. Ma, my car won't start. Can you drive me to work? For 4 years, whenever Marcus had car trouble, I had immediately jumped into action. I had driven him to work, picked him up, paid for repairs, even loaned him my car when his was in the shop for days. Take the bus, I said, not looking up from my newspaper. The bus? Ma, I'll be late. Mr. Henderson already told me one more tardy and I'm fired. Then you better hurry to the bus stop. He stared at me as if I had spoken in a foreign language. Are you serious right now? Dead serious. I heard him stomping around the house, muttering under his breath about how I was being unreasonable. The front door slammed hard enough to rattle the windows. An hour later, Shanice emerged from their bedroom in her pajamas, padding into the kitchen with the expectation of finding breakfast waiting for her. Instead, she found me reading my book and drinking my second cup of coffee. Where's breakfast? She asked, opening the refrigerator and staring at its contents as if food would magically appear. In the kitchen, I replied, without looking up. Very funny. You know what I mean. I know exactly what you mean. And I'm telling you that your breakfast is in the kitchen. You're standing in the kitchen. Figure it out. She slammed the refrigerator door hard enough to make the condiments rattle. What's gotten into you lately? Ever since we talked about you moving to a senior place, you've been acting all weird and hostile. I finally looked up from my book. Hostile? Is that what you call it when someone stops being your personal servant? We never asked you to be our servant. You're right. You never asked. You just expected it. And I was foolish enough to give it. The conversation that followed was loud enough for the neighbors to hear. Shanice accused me of being selfish, ungrateful for their company, and cruel for changing the rules after so many years. I listened to every word with a calmness that seemed to infuriate her even more. When she finished her tantrum, I stood up and walked to my bedroom. I had better things to do than argue with someone who saw my kindness as weakness. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went to the mall and bought myself a new dress. Not for any special occasion, not because I needed it, but simply because I wanted it. I had lunch at the little cafe in the food court, reading my book and watching people walk by. For the first time in years, I felt free. When I came home, the house was in chaos. Dirty dishes covered every surface in the kitchen. The living room looked like a tornado had hit it. Marcus was on the phone, his voice strained and desperate. "No, man, I can't pay you back this week. My situation at home is complicated right now." He hung up when he saw me, his face flushed with embarrassment and anger. "Ma, we need to talk." "About what?" "About this attitude you've developed. Shanice is upset, I'm stressed about work, and you're acting like you don't care about your own family anymore." I set my shopping bag down carefully and looked at my son. "Marcus, let me ask you something. In the past 4 years, how many times have you asked me how I'm doing? Not what I'm cooking for dinner, not whether I can drive you somewhere or lend you money, just how I'm doing as a person." He opened his mouth, then closed it again. I could see him trying to remember a single instance. "How many times have you and Shanice invited me to join you for anything? A movie, dinner out, even just sitting on the porch talking?" Again, silence. "How many times have you thanked me for paying your bills, buying your food, washing your clothes?" The silence stretched between us like a chasm. In that moment, I think Marcus began to understand what I had finally realized. They had never seen me as a person with feelings, needs, and dreams of my own. I was just a resource to be used. "Ma, he started, but I held up my hand. Don't apologize now because you're realizing how bad this looks. Don't pretend you care about my feelings because you're starting to worry about your free ride ending." I picked up my shopping bag and headed toward my room. "You have 2 days left to come up with the money or make other arrangements." That night, I heard them on the phone with various people, trying to find somewhere else to live. I heard Shanice crying, not from genuine remorse, but from the frustration of losing her comfortable setup. I heard Marcus making increasingly desperate calls to friends, relatives, anyone who might take them in. The next morning, there was a knock at my front door. I opened it to find a woman about my age, with kind eyes and a gentle smile. "Mrs. Johnson, I'm Carol Williams. I work with the Social Services Department. Your daughter-in-law called us yesterday. She's concerned about your well-being." My blood went cold. Shanice had called social services on me, trying to make me look like an unfit senior citizen who couldn't manage her own affairs. "What kind of concerns?" I asked, stepping back to let Carol into my living room. "She mentioned that you've been displaying erratic behavior, making irrational financial decisions, and possibly suffering from some form of cognitive decline." I sat down heavily on my couch. This was low, even for Shanice. She was trying to have me declared incompetent so they could take control of my finances. "Mrs. Johnson, I have to ask you some questions, and I want you to know that this is just routine. Can you tell me what day it is?" For the next hour, Carol asked me questions about my mental state, my living situation, my financial management. She looked around my clean, well-maintained home, reviewed my bank statements, and spoke with me about my daily routines. When she finished, she closed her folder and looked at me with something that might have been admiration. "Mrs. Johnson, I want you to know that there is absolutely nothing wrong with your mental capacity. In fact, you seem to be handling a difficult family situation with remarkable clarity and strength." Relief flooded through me. "So you won't recommend any kind of intervention?" "The only intervention I would recommend is that your family members start treating you with the respect you deserve." Carol paused at my front door. "Mrs. Johnson, I see this kind of thing more often than you might think. Adult children who view their aging parents as sources of income, rather than people deserving of love and respect. What you're doing, setting boundaries, and protecting your financial future. That's not erratic behavior. That's wisdom. After Carol left, I sat in my living room thinking about how far Shanice was willing to go to maintain her comfortable lifestyle. She had tried to have me declared mentally incompetent rather than get a job and pay her own bills. That evening, Marcus and Shanice sat me down for what they clearly thought would be a serious negotiation. "Ma, we've been thinking about what you said," Marcus began, "and we want to make this work. We can pay you $400 a month, and maybe we can work out some kind of arrangement for the rest." $400 out of the $1,200 I had asked for. "What kind of arrangement?" I asked. Shanice leaned forward with that false smile I had come to recognize. "Well, we figured since you're getting older, you probably need help around the house anyway. So we could do more cleaning and maintenance work, and that could count toward our rent." They wanted to pay me $400 and claim that their minimal household contributions were worth $800 more. "No," I said simply. "No," Marcus's voice cracked slightly. "No, the amount is $1,200 per month, paid in full by the first of each month, or you find somewhere else to live." Shanice's mask finally slipped completely. "You're being ridiculous, Gloria. We're not strangers. We're family. You can't treat family like this." "You're absolutely right," I said, standing up. "Family shouldn't treat each other like this. Family shouldn't call each other burdens. Family shouldn't try to have each other declared mentally incompetent when they don't get their way. Family shouldn't take advantage of generosity for 4 years without showing any gratitude or respect." The room fell silent. They had no response because they knew I was right. "You have until tomorrow evening," I said. "After that, I'm filing for a formal eviction." That night, I barely slept. Part of me wondered if I was being too harsh, if there was some way to salvage this relationship with my son. But every time I started to weaken, I remembered Shanice's voice on that phone call, laughing about how desperate I was to feel useful. The next evening came and went without any money appearing. At 8 o'clock, there was a soft knock on my bedroom door. "Ma, can I come in?" Marcus entered, looking defeated. His shoulders were slumped, and for the first time in years, he looked like he understood the gravity of his situation. "We don't have the money," he said quietly. "And we don't have anywhere else to go." "That's not my problem to solve anymore," I replied, though my heart ached seeing him like this. "Ma, I know we messed up. I know Shanice said some things she shouldn't have said. But where are we supposed to go?" "The same place every other adult goes when they can't afford their housing. You find cheaper accommodations. You get second jobs. You figure it out." Marcus sat down heavily on the edge of my bed. "I never thought it would come to this. What did you think, Marcus? That you could live off your mother forever? That I would just keep paying for everything while you two treated me like hired help?" He was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "I guess I thought you liked taking care of us. You never complained. I never complained because I loved you, because I wanted to help. But there's a difference between helping someone get back on their feet and enabling them to never grow up." The next morning, I woke up to the sound of packing. Marcus and Shanice were loading their belongings into trash bags and old suitcases, moving with the frantic energy of people who had finally run out of options. I made my coffee and sat at my kitchen table, watching them through the window as they loaded their car. A part of me wanted to run outside and tell them they could stay, that we would figure something out, but I knew that would just reset the cycle of dependency and disrespect. Shanice walked past my kitchen window carrying a box, her face set in hard lines of resentment. She never looked toward the house, never acknowledged that she was leaving the woman who had provided for her for 4 years. Marcus came to say goodbye. He stood awkwardly in my kitchen, the same kitchen where I had taught him to make scrambled eggs all those years ago. "Ma, I want you to know that I'm sorry for everything." I looked at my son, this man I had raised and loved and sacrificed for. "I hope you are, Marcus, and I hope you learn something from this. Will you stay in touch? Let us know how you're doing." "That depends on you," I said. "When you're ready to have a relationship with me that's based on love and respect instead of money and convenience, you know where to find me." He hugged me then, and for a moment he was my little boy again. But when he pulled away, I saw something different in his eyes. Maybe it was the beginning of understanding. Maybe it was just fear about his uncertain future. After they left, I walked through my empty house. For the first time in 4 years, it was truly mine again. Their bedroom was a mess of forgotten belongings and trash. But that could be cleaned up. What mattered was the silence, the peace, the absence of people who saw me as nothing more than a source of income and services. I called Dorothy to tell her what had happened. She whooped so loud, I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "Girl, I am so proud of you. It's about time you stood up for yourself. I feel terrible, though. What if they end up homeless? What if something happens to Marcus? Gloria, listen to me. Those are natural consequences for their choices. You gave them 4 years to get their act together. You gave them 30 days' notice. You offered them a reasonable arrangement to stay. They chose not to accept it. That's on them, not you." That night, I sat in my living room with a cup of tea, really looking at my space for the first time in years. The furniture was all arranged for their convenience. The television was always tuned to their programs. Even the temperature was set to what they preferred. I spent the next week reclaiming my house. I rearranged furniture to suit my needs. I stocked the refrigerator with foods I actually liked instead of what they wanted. I programmed the cable box to my favorite channels. I set the thermostat to a temperature that made me comfortable. It was during this process of reclaiming my space that I made a discovery that changed everything. I was cleaning out Marcus and Shanice's former bedroom when I found a shoebox hidden under a pile of old clothes in the closet. Something about the way it was tucked away, deliberately concealed, made me curious. When I opened it, my hands began to shake. Inside were bank statements, credit card applications, loan documents, and receipts that painted a picture I never could have imagined. For the past 2 years, Marcus and Shanice had been using my address, my good credit history, and forged versions of my signature to take out loans and credit cards in my name. There were 3 credit cards I had never applied for, each maxed out to their $5,000 limits. There was a personal loan for $8,000 that I supposedly had requested for home improvements. There were store credit accounts at furniture stores, electronics retailers, and clothing boutiques. My legs gave out, and I sat down hard on the bare mattress they had left behind. The shoebox fell from my lap, spilling its contents across the floor like evidence at a crime scene. $23,000 in debt that I knew nothing about, all in my name, all used to fund their lifestyle while they lived rent-free in my house. I picked up one of the credit card statements with trembling fingers. The charges told a story of casual extravagance that made my stomach turn. Expensive dinners at restaurants I had never been to. Shopping sprees at stores I couldn't afford. A weekend getaway to a resort that cost more than my monthly pension check. They had been living a double life, enjoying luxuries on credit taken out in my name, while accepting my daily sacrifices as if they were owed to them. Every time I had scraped together money for their emergencies, every meal I had cooked with ingredients bought from my grocery budget, every bill I had paid from my retirement savings, they had been secretly spending thousands more of my money that I didn't even know they had access to. I called the credit card companies one by one, my voice shaking as I explained that these accounts were fraudulent. Each conversation was the same. Yes, the applications were in my name. Yes, they had been approved based on my credit history and income. Yes, someone using my personal information had been making charges for 2 years. The customer service representatives were sympathetic but firm. I would need to file police reports for identity theft. I would need to dispute each charge individually. The process could take months, and there was no guarantee I would be able to recover all the money. By the time I finished the last phone call, it was dark outside. I sat in my kitchen, surrounded by papers, feeling like my entire world had collapsed. The $60,000 I thought they had cost me was just the beginning. They had stolen my identity, my credit, my financial future. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Shanice's smug face as she called me a burden. I heard her laughing on the phone about having a live-in ATM. I thought about how they had looked me in the eye every day, accepting my generosity while secretly robbing me blind. The next morning, I drove to the police station to file the identity theft reports. Officer Martinez, a young woman with kind eyes, listened to my story with growing concern. "Mrs. Johnson, I have to tell you, this is one of the worst cases of family financial abuse I've seen. The amount of money involved, the length of time it went on, the deliberate deception. This isn't just theft. This is systematic exploitation." "What can be done about it?" I asked. "Well, we'll investigate. We'll issue warrants if we find enough evidence. But I have to be honest with you. Proving intent in family fraud cases is complicated. They'll claim they had your permission, that it was a misunderstanding." I left the police station feeling defeated. Even if Marcus and Shanice were prosecuted, the damage was already done. My credit was ruined. My savings were depleted. My retirement security was gone. That afternoon, I called my financial advisor, Patricia, to tell her about the discovery. The silence on the other end of the phone was so long, I thought the call had dropped. "Patricia, are you there?" "I'm here, Gloria. I'm just trying to process this. Combined with what they took directly from you, we're looking at over $80,000 in losses. $80,000. My entire life savings, gone. The money I had worked 40 years to accumulate. The security I had planned to rely on in my old age, stolen by my own son and his wife. What are my options?" I asked, though I was afraid to hear the answer. "Honestly, not many good ones. You can try to recover some of it through the identity theft process, but that's uncertain and slow. You might be able to sue them civilly, but if they don't have assets, you can't collect. And in the meantime, you're responsible for these debts." After I hung up with Patricia, I sat in my quiet house and tried to make sense of what had happened to my life. 3 weeks ago, I had thought I was living with family who took advantage of my generosity. Now, I discovered I had been living with criminals who had systematically destroyed my financial future. The cruelest part was realizing how carefully planned it had been. They had stayed long enough to establish residency and gain access to my personal information. They had been kind enough to keep me from becoming suspicious while they set up their schemes. Shanice's occasional help with small tasks, Marcus's moments of seeming gratitude, it had all been calculated to maintain their access to my resources. I was sitting at my kitchen table that evening when the phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but something made me answer it. "Is this Gloria Johnson?" The voice was unfamiliar, a woman who sounded nervous. "Yes. Who is this?" "My name is Keisha. I'm calling about Marcus Johnson and Shanice Williams. I heard they were staying with you, but someone told me they moved out recently." "Yes. They're no longer living here. Can I ask what this is about?" "Ma'am, they owe me $3,000. They borrowed money from me 6 months ago, promised they'd pay it back with interest, and now I can't reach them. I was hoping maybe you could help me get in touch." My heart sank. "How did you know to call me?" "They gave me your address as their permanent residence. Said if anything happened, I should contact you because you were helping them manage their finances." I closed my eyes, feeling another wave of betrayal wash over me. "I'm sorry, Keisha, but I don't have any way to reach them, and I'm not responsible for their debts." "But ma'am, they said you were like their business partner, that you were backing their ventures." "Their ventures?" "Yeah. They told me they were starting some kind of consulting business, and you were the investor. They showed me paperwork with your address on it." After I hung up, I realized this was probably just the beginning. How many other people had they borrowed money from using my name and address? How many other schemes had they been running while living under my roof? Over the next few days, I received 4 more similar calls. People looking for Marcus and Shanice, asking me to help them collect debts or return items that had been purchased with bad checks. Each conversation revealed another layer of deception, another way they had used my reputation, an address to support their fraudulent activities. I started keeping a notebook, writing down every call, every debt, every scheme I discovered. The picture that emerged was of 2 people who had been systematically scamming everyone they could while using me as their home base and unwitting cover. The worst call came on Thursday evening. An elderly man named Robert called, his voice shaky with emotion. "Mrs. Johnson, I hate to bother you, but I'm trying to reach Marcus. He borrowed $5,000 from my retirement fund 6 months ago. Told me he was starting a business and would pay me back with 20% interest within 90 days. $5,000 from another senior citizen's retirement fund." I felt sick. "Sir, I'm so sorry, but I don't have any contact information for Marcus, and I had no knowledge of any business or loans. But he said you were his business partner. He had me write the check to cash because he said that's how you preferred to handle the investments." I spent an hour on the phone with Robert, trying to explain that I had been as deceived as he had been. By the end of the conversation, we were both crying. 2 senior citizens, both robbed by people we had trusted. That night, I made a decision. I couldn't get my money back, and I couldn't undo the damage they had done to my life. But I could make sure they faced consequences for what they had stolen from me and others. I called Officer Martinez and told her about all the phone calls I had been receiving. She asked me to bring in my notebook and any documentation I had gathered. "Mrs. Johnson, what you're describing sounds like a much larger pattern of fraud than just the identity theft. We're talking about potential wire fraud, elder abuse, conspiracy charges. This could be a federal case." "What does that mean?" "It means Marcus and Shanice could be facing serious prison time if we can build a solid case. And it sounds like you're giving us exactly what we need to do that." For the first time since finding that shoebox, I felt a spark of hope. Not hope that I would get my money back, but hope that justice might be served. I spent the weekend going through every document, every bank statement, every receipt I could find. I created a timeline of their activities, cross-referenced with my own financial records. The pattern was clear and damning. On Monday morning, I met with a federal investigator named Agent Thompson. She was a serious woman in her 40s who specialized in financial crimes against the elderly. Mrs. Johnson, I want you to know that what happened to you is unfortunately common, but the scale of it is unusual. Most family fraud cases involve a few $1,000s over a few months. What Marcus and Shanice did to you was systematic and extensive. Can you prosecute them? Based on what you've shown me, yes. We have multiple victims, documented fraud across state lines, and a clear pattern of premeditation. This isn't a case of family members making poor financial decisions. This is organized criminal activity. I left that meeting feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Not happiness exactly, but a sense that there might be justice in the world after all. 2 weeks later, Agent Thompson called me with news. We've located Marcus and Shanice. They're living in an apartment across town, still using credit cards they opened in your name. We're executing search warrants tomorrow morning. Will I need to be there? No, but you might want to prepare yourself. This is going to become public, and they're going to be arrested. Are you ready for your son to face criminal charges? I thought about that question for a long time. Marcus was my only child, the boy I had raised alone, the person I had loved more than anyone in the world. But he was also the man who had stolen my life savings, destroyed my credit, and used my love as a weapon against me. I'm ready, I told Agent Thompson. He made his choices. The next morning, I sat in my kitchen, drinking coffee and waiting for the phone to ring. At 10:30, Agent Thompson called. It's done. We arrested them both at their apartment. We found evidence of additional fraud schemes, more fake documents, and over $15,000 in cash hidden in their bedroom. What happens now? They'll be arraigned, probably later today. The charges are serious enough that bail will be substantial. Given their history of fraud and the fact that they've been using false identities, they'll probably be held until trial. I hung up the phone and sat in the silence of my house. Marcus and Shanice were in jail. My son, who I had carried in my body for 9 months, who I had stayed up with through fevers and nightmares, who I had worked double shifts to support, was behind bars for stealing from his own mother. The pain was overwhelming, but underneath it was something else, relief. For the first time in years, I knew they couldn't hurt me anymore. They couldn't take any more of my money, couldn't use my address for their schemes, couldn't manipulate my love for their own gain. That afternoon, Dorothy came over with a bottle of wine and a sympathy card. I don't know whether to congratulate you or console you, she said, settling into my living room chair. Both, I think, I replied. I'm proud that I stood up for myself, but I'm heartbroken that it came to this. Gloria, honey, you didn't make it come to this. They did. Every choice they made led them to where they are now. We spent the evening talking about the future. For the first time in years, I could make plans without worrying about Marcus and Shanice's needs or emergencies. I could think about what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. The trial was scheduled for 6 months later. In the meantime, I began the slow process of rebuilding my financial life. The identity theft claims were gradually being resolved, though I would never recover all the money they had stolen. I learned to live on a much smaller budget, but I also learned that I needed less than I had thought. I started volunteering at a senior center, helping other elderly people who had been victims of family fraud. I discovered that my story was not unique, that thousands of seniors across the country were being financially abused by their own children and grandchildren. The work was painful, but healing. Every person I helped felt like a small victory against the forces that had tried to destroy me. I couldn't get my money back, but I could help others protect theirs. 3 months before the trial, I received an unexpected phone call. "Mrs. Johnson, this is Attorney Williams. I'm representing your son, Marcus. He would like to meet with you to discuss a possible plea agreement." "What kind of plea agreement?" "If you would be willing to speak on his behalf at sentencing, to tell the court about his good qualities and your relationship, the prosecutors might be willing to reduce some of the charges." I was quiet for so long that the lawyer asked if I was still there. "I'm here," I said finally, "but I won't be speaking on Marcus's behalf." "Ma'am, I understand you're hurt, but he is your son. A word from you could mean the difference between 5 years in prison and 15. Then he should have thought about that before he decided to steal $80,000 from his mother." The lawyer tried to argue, to appeal to my maternal instincts, to convince me that family loyalty required me to help Marcus avoid the consequences of his actions. But I had learned something important over the past few months. Love doesn't mean protecting people from the results of their choices. Sometimes love means letting them face the truth about what they've done. When the trial finally came, I sat in the courtroom and watched my son plead guilty to multiple counts of fraud, identity theft, and elder abuse. Shanice, sitting beside him, refused to look in my direction. The prosecutor read the charges and the evidence. The judge listened to testimony from the other victims, including Robert, the elderly man whose retirement savings they had stolen. When it was time for sentencing, I was asked if I wanted to make a victim impact statement. I stood up slowly, feeling the weight of every one of my 68 years. I looked at Marcus, sitting at the defendant's table in his orange jumpsuit, and for a moment, I saw the little boy who used to climb into my bed during thunderstorms. Then I began to speak. "Your Honor, Marcus Johnson is my only child. I raised him by myself after his father abandoned us when Marcus was 3 years old. I worked 2 jobs to keep food on our table and a roof over our heads. I sacrificed everything to give him opportunities I never had." Marcus was crying now, his shoulders shaking with sobs. "I taught him right from wrong. I taught him to respect his elders, to be honest, to work hard for what he wanted. Somewhere along the way, those lessons were forgotten." I paused, looking directly at my son. The man sitting at that table stole my life savings. He destroyed my credit. He used my love as a weapon against me. He took advantage of every sacrifice I made for him and turned it into an opportunity to rob me. The courtroom was completely silent. But more than that, he stole my ability to trust. He stole my sense of security. He stole my golden years and turned them into a struggle for financial survival. I took a deep breath before continuing. "I want this court to know that I am not here today asking for leniency. I am here asking for justice, not just for me, but for all the elderly people who are being victimized by family members they trusted and loved." When I sat down, there wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom. The judge sentenced Marcus to 8 years in federal prison. Shanice received 6 years. As they were led away in handcuffs, Marcus turned to look at me one last time. I saw regret in his eyes, but it was too late for regret to matter. After the trial, Agent Thompson walked me to my car. "Mrs. Johnson, what you did today took incredible courage. Most family fraud victims never report the crimes, let alone testify against their own children." "It wasn't courage," I replied. "It was necessity. If I didn't stand up for myself, who would?" That evening, I sat in my quiet house, thinking about the journey that had brought me to this moment. 6 months ago, I had been a woman who believed her worth was measured by how much she could give to others. I had been so afraid of being alone that I had allowed myself to be used and abused. Now I was alone, but by choice. I was financially struggling, but I was free. I was heartbroken, but I was also at peace. The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Dorothy. "How are you feeling, baby?" "Free," I said, and I meant it. Sometimes the hardest lesson we learn is that love without boundaries isn't love at all. It's enabling. I spent 4 years being a burden to people who saw me as nothing more than a walking ATM. And when I finally said enough, I discovered my true worth wasn't measured in dollars given, but in the strength to take my life back. If my story resonates with you, please share it with someone who might need to hear that it's never too late to choose yourself.